The message had traveled for 3 weeks across the cold emptiness of space. It came in 17 different languages, each one precisely translated, each one carrying the same meaning. The Galactic Council welcomed humanity to the community of civilized species. They were invited to attend a formal reception at Station Theta 7, located in neutral space between several major territories. Ambassador David Chen read the message for the 5th time that morning. He sat in his office on the lunar base, Earth hanging like a blue jewel in the black sky outside his window. The message seemed polite enough on the surface. Words like benevolent, guidance, and uplift appeared throughout the text. But Chen had studied history. He knew what those words really meant. "They think we're primitives," he said to Admiral Helena Voss, who stood by the window with her arms crossed. Helena was a tall woman with iron-gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her uniform was crisp and dark, decorated with medals from 3 different wars that the galaxy knew nothing about. She had the look of someone who had seen too much death and decided to prevent more of it through any means necessary. "Of course they do," Helena replied. "We only discovered their existence 8 months ago. They've been watching us for what, 5 years? They saw our chemical rockets and radio waves. They think we just figured out how to leave our solar system." Chen smiled slightly. "Should we tell them the truth?" "Not yet," Helena said. She turned from the window to face him. "Let them keep thinking we're children playing with toys. It makes what comes next so much more effective." The plan had been approved by the United Earth Security Council 3 days after the invitation arrived. Earth would attend the reception. They would send diplomats and scientists just as the Galactic Council expected, but they would arrive in a way that made one thing absolutely clear. Humanity would not be treated as inferiors. On Station Theta 7, Council Arbiter Zixthor moved through the preparations with growing excitement. The station was a massive structure, built over centuries by a dozen different species. It floated in empty space, a symbol of unity and cooperation. Or at least that's what the official histories claimed. Zixthor knew the truth was more complicated. He was Vrix, an insectoid species that had held power in the Council for over 2,000 years. His kind stood on 4 legs with 2 smaller arms for manipulation and massive compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. His exoskeleton was decorated with markings that showed his rank and family lineage. "The humans have confirmed their arrival," his assistant said, a nervous young Vrix named Pilek. "They will arrive in 6 standard days." "Excellent," Zixthor clicked his mandibles together in satisfaction. "Have we prepared the standard welcome package? Translation devices, atmospheric adjusters, cultural briefings?" "Yes, Arbiter. Everything is ready. We've assigned them quarters in Section 7 near the other junior species." Zixthor felt pleased with himself. Another species to guide, another civilization to bring into the Council's embrace. The humans would learn, as all species did, that the galaxy had rules, systems of trade and hierarchy that had existed for millennia. They would take their place as grateful members of the community, happy to accept the wisdom of older, more experienced species. "What size vessel should we expect?" Zixthor asked. Pilek checked his data tablet. "They didn't specify, Arbiter. But standard protocol for new species is a small diplomatic craft, usually no more than 50 meters in length, carrying perhaps 20 individuals. Prepare docking bay 12 then, the small one." What Zixthor didn't know was that at that very moment, in orbit around Earth's moon, something enormous was preparing to move. The UESS Prometheus Unbound hung in space like a sleeping dragon. It was 15 kilometers long, a mass of dark metal and angular armor plating. Weapon ports lined its hull like the scales of some mechanical serpent. Inside, 12,000 crew members prepared for the mission that would change humanity's place in the galaxy forever. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge, watching Earth rotate slowly beneath them. She had commanded smaller ships before, frigates and destroyers in the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity 50 years ago. The resource wars had killed 2 billion people before the survivors finally came together. They had learned a hard lesson: unity or extinction. That lesson had driven everything that came after. The desperate push for new technology, the secret development of faster-than-light travel, the decision to hide from the galaxy while building strength. For 30 years, humanity had watched and waited and built. They had seen how the Galactic Council operated. They had studied the power structures and military capabilities of a dozen major species, and they had decided that they would never, Ever be at anyone's mercy again? All systems ready, Admiral, her first officer reported. Commander James Park was younger than Voss, but he had the same hard look in his eyes. The look of someone who had studied history and refused to repeat it. Crew status? Voss asked. All personnel accounted for and ready. The Marines are itching for action, but they understand this is a diplomatic mission. Mostly. Voss allowed herself a small smile. Tell them they'll get their chance to make an impression. Just by standing there. She turned to face the main view screen, which showed a computer projection of their course to Station Theta 7. 6 days of FTL travel. 6 days to cross distances that should have taken decades with the technology the Council thought humanity possessed. Ambassador Chen is aboard? She asked. Yes, ma'am. He's in his quarters reviewing his speech. Good. Voss took a deep breath. Then let's show the galaxy what humans really are. Helm, take us out. Full fleet formation. Behind the Prometheus Unbound, 47 other massive warships powered their engines. They moved together like a school of steel fish, their movements perfectly coordinated. Each one was a statement of purpose. Each one was a promise and a threat. As they vanished into faster-than-light travel, every sensor in Earth's solar system recorded the gravitational distortion. The sheer power required to move such mass faster than light left ripples in space-time itself. On Station Theta 7, Arbiter Zixthor went to sleep that night satisfied with his preparations. He dreamed of grateful humans accepting the Council's generous guidance. He had no idea that everything was about to change. The sensors detected it first. Station Theta 7's long-range scanning arrays picked up a distortion in space approximately 6 million kilometers away. The readings made no sense. Whatever was creating the distortion was massive, far larger than any diplomatic vessel in the Council's extensive database. Junior sensor technician Kellis stared at her screen with growing confusion. She was Kel, an amphibious species with blue-green skin and large eyes adapted for seeing underwater. Her webbed fingers moved across the controls trying to refine the sensor data. Senior technician, she called out in the bubbling voice of her species. I'm getting strange readings from the human arrival vector. Senior technician Vrachek slithered over to her station. He was Lumini, a being made primarily of contained energy within a vaguely humanoid field. He glowed with a soft yellow light as he examined her screen. He pulsed, his voice created by vibrating the air around him. That can't be right. Run a diagnostic on the array. Kellis had already done that twice. Diagnostics show green across the board. The readings are accurate, senior technician. Whatever is approaching us is very large. Vrachek felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. He had been monitoring space traffic around Station Theta 7 for 40 years. He knew the size and signature of every class of vessel in the galaxy. This reading matched nothing in his experience. Alert the Arbiter, he said quietly. Within minutes, alarms were sounding throughout the command center. Arbiter Zixthor rushed from his quarters, his 4 legs carrying him quickly through the corridors. He burst into the sensor control room, mandibles clicking in agitation. Report, he demanded. Sir, the humans are arriving, Vrachek explained, trying to keep his light from flickering with anxiety. But our sensors cannot get accurate readings. The vessel is large, much larger than expected. And there's some kind of interference preventing detailed scans. Zixthor pushed his way to the main display. What he saw made his blood run cold. The distortion was growing larger, closer, and now the visual sensors were picking up something. It appeared first as a shadow, a darkness that seemed to eat light itself. As it grew closer, details began to emerge. Angular armor plating, massive thruster arrays, weapon ports that looked like the eyes of some ancient predator. The UESS Prometheus Unbound dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a flash of exotic radiation. It appeared at the edge of the system with a gravitational presence that made nearby asteroids shift in their orbits. Station Theta 7's defensive shields flickered and strained against the unexpected gravity well. By the ancestors, Kellis whispered. The ship was enormous. It stretched 15 kilometers from bow to stern, a mountain of metal and technology hanging in space. Its hull was made of something that absorbed sensor waves, creating blank spots in their readings. They couldn't detect its weapon systems. They couldn't scan its interior. They couldn't even get accurate readings of its mass. It was like looking at a void in space, a hole cut out of reality itself. Sir, the vessel is approaching. Vrahek reported, his voice cracking with strain. And it's not slowing down. Zixthor watched in horror as the massive warship continued toward the station at what should have been a reckless speed. Any normal vessel would have dropped to minimal thrust by now, allowing the station's traffic control to guide it to a docking berth. This ship came on like an avalanche, like a predator that had spotted prey. "Hail them," Zixthor shouted. "Tell them to reduce speed immediately." The communications officer, a nervous Vrix named Tikish, opened a channel. "Unidentified vessel, this is Station Theta 7 traffic control. You are approaching at unsafe speed. Please reduce thrust and await docking instructions." For a long moment, there was only silence. Then a voice came through the speakers, clear and calm and utterly unconcerned. "Station Theta 7, this is Admiral Helena Voss of the United Earth ship Prometheus Unbound. We are reducing speed to parking velocity. Please stand by." The ship fired its reverse thrusters. The exhaust wash was visible from the station. Massive plumes of superheated plasma that could have vaporized a small moon. The Prometheus slowed, its momentum gradually bleeding off. But it didn't stop where traffic control expected. It stopped exactly 50 kilometers from the station. Close enough to shake hands as the human expression went. But far too close for any military protocol. The ship's weapons, whatever they were, could strike the station in seconds from that range. Zixthor felt something he had rarely experienced in his long life. Fear. On the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, Admiral Voss allowed herself a slight smile. The sensor feeds showed the station's defensive systems powering up, their shields strengthening, their own weapons coming online. It was all exactly as predicted. "Excellent positioning, Helm," she said calmly. "Maintain station keeping at 50 kilometers. Commander Park stood beside her, his eyes on the tactical display. "Station is hailing us again, Admiral." "They sound upset." "I imagine they are. Send our formal greetings." "And Commander?" "Yes, ma'am." "Execute atmospheric test procedure 7. Park's eyes widened slightly, then he smiled. "Aye, aye, Admiral." Initiating atmospheric test. Deep in the Prometheus's engineering sections, massive valves opened. The ship's atmospheric recycling system was designed to handle the air supply for 12,000 crew members. It generated oxygen through chemical and biological processes, maintained temperature and humidity, and regularly vented waste gases into space. What the station saw was the Prometheus suddenly expelling massive clouds of superheated gas directly toward them. The exhaust ports glowed orange with heat. Plasma and steam erupted from the ship's sides in controlled bursts. On Station Theta 7, alarms blared throughout every section. "They're venting plasma," someone shouted. "Evasive action." "Belay that!" Zixthor commanded, though his voice shook. He watched the readouts carefully. The venting was controlled, precise. None of the exhaust was actually on a collision course with the station. It would dissipate long before reaching them. But the message was clear. The Prometheus was showing them what it could do. The heat radiating from those vents could melt armor. The pressure could rupture hulls. And this was just their environmental systems. Another message came through from the human ship. "Station Theta 7, this is the Prometheus. Please excuse our routine maintenance procedures. We've been in transit for several days and needed to cycle our atmospheric systems. We hope we didn't cause any alarm." The voice was Admiral Voss again, and Zixthor could hear the smile in her words. She knew exactly what she had done. This wasn't maintenance. This was a demonstration. "Shall I respond, Arbiter?" Tikish asked quietly. Zixthor stared at the massive warship floating in the darkness. He thought about the peaceful diplomatic meeting he had planned. He thought about the prepared speeches about galactic harmony and cooperation. He thought about all the assumptions he had made about these primitive humans. "Yes," he said finally. "Tell them they are welcome to Station Theta 7, and prepare for their delegation to come aboard." "What docking bay should I assign them, sir?" Zixthor watched as the Prometheus rotated slowly, its hull bristling with systems he couldn't identify. "Give them the main diplomatic hangar. The one designed for council warships, because that's what this was. Not a diplomatic vessel, not a scout ship. This was a warship, designed and built for combat. And the humans had brought it to first contact like a calling card. In the sensor control room, Kellis noticed something else on her displays, a faint distortion, barely visible in the background radiation. She adjusted her sensors, trying to get a clearer reading. "Senior technician," she said hesitantly, "I think there might be something else out there." "Multiple somethings," But they're even harder to detect than the Prometheus. Vrachek looked at her readings and felt his light dim with dread. Don't report that, he said quietly. Not yet. But, sir, not yet, he repeated firmly. Because if what he suspected was true, the Prometheus wasn't alone. And that thought was more terrifying than anything he could imagine. The diplomatic shuttle from Station Theta 7 looked like a toy as it approached the Prometheus Unbound. Inside the small craft, Arbiter Zixthor sat with his delegation, trying to maintain his composure. Around him were representatives from the major council species, 2 more Vrix officials, 3 Lumine diplomats, and 4 Kel scientists. Remember, Zixthor said, his mandibles clicking nervously, we are here to welcome them into galactic society. We must show them patience and understanding. They are young, impulsive. They don't understand proper protocols. One of the Lumini, a senior diplomat named Luxara, pulsed with skepticism. That ship suggests they understand quite a lot, Arbiter. It's just a ship, Zixthor insisted, though he didn't believe his own words. Large, yes, but size isn't everything. Our technology is far more refined. The shuttle pilot, a young Kel named Miposh, guided them toward the docking bay that the humans had designated. As they approached, he couldn't help but notice the scale of everything. The docking bay opening was massive, large enough to swallow their shuttle 10 times over. The hull plating showed signs of scoring and repair, evidence that this ship had seen combat. The shuttle settled onto the deck with a gentle bump. Through the viewports, they could see the cavernous interior of the hangar bay, and waiting for them, a formation of humans. Atmosphere reading as breathable, Miposh reported, checking his instruments. Then he paused, his large eyes widening. Wait, the oxygen content is very high. 21%. That's more than triple our standard. Zixthor felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Can we breathe it? Yes, but not comfortably. I recommend we use respiratory assistance. The delegation fitted themselves with small breather devices that would filter and adjust the air they inhaled. The devices were designed for short-term use in hostile environments. The message was already clear before they even left the shuttle. This was not a comfortable place for them. The ramp lowered, and Zixthor led his delegation out onto the deck of the hangar bay. Immediately he felt the difference in the air. It was thick, rich with oxygen. Each breath felt like inhaling fire. The breather device helped, but he could already feel his system struggling to process the excess oxygen. His thoughts felt slightly fuzzy, his movements a fraction slower. Waiting for them was a line of humans in dark military uniforms. They stood at attention, perfectly still, each one at least 2 meters tall. Their physical presence was intimidating in a way that Zixthor hadn't expected. The Vrix were not small, but these humans made him feel small. At the center of the formation stood Admiral Helena Voss. She stepped forward, and Zixthor noticed how she moved. Not with the careful precision of someone in a formal ceremony, but with the easy confidence of a predator in its own territory. Arbiter Zixthor, she said, her voice clear and strong. Welcome aboard the Prometheus Unbound. I am Admiral Helena Voss, commanding officer. On behalf of humanity, we thank you for your invitation to join the galactic community. Zixthor tried to respond, but the oxygen-rich air made him slightly dizzy. He took a moment to adjust his breather before speaking. Admiral Voss, we are honored to meet you. Though I must say we expected a smaller diplomatic vessel. Voss smiled, and there was something unsettling about the expression. Humans showed their teeth when they were pleased. It looked disturbingly like a threat display. The Prometheus is our standard long-range vessel, she said smoothly. We thought it appropriate for such an important occasion. I hope the atmosphere isn't causing you discomfort. It's quite rich in oxygen. Luxara pulsed, her light flickering slightly. Energy beings like the Lumine were destabilized by high oxygen content. It interfered with their containment fields. How unfortunate, Voss said, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what the atmosphere would do. We assumed all intelligent species would have evolved in similar conditions. Our planet's atmosphere is 21% oxygen. It's perfectly normal for us. The implication hung in the air like poison. Normal for us. The atmosphere that was making the delegation struggle was the baseline for humanity. They had evolved in conditions that would be toxic to most galactic species. What kind of world created beings that breathed fire? If you'll follow me, Voss continued. Ambassador Chen is waiting in our conference chamber. We have much to discuss. She turned and began walking without waiting for confirmation. The delegation had no choice but to follow. As they moved through the corridors of the Prometheus, Zixthor began to understand that everything they were seeing was calculated. The corridors were huge, clearly designed for humans in some kind of powered armor. Even unarmored, the humans were tall, but the spaces suggested they expected to move through them wearing equipment that made them even larger. Every wall panel, every doorway, every piece of equipment was built on a scale that made the delegation feel like children. And the humans made sure they saw everything. Their route took them past armories where rows of weapons hung on racks. Not elegant energy weapons like most species used, but brutal kinetic rifles and explosive launchers. They passed training rooms where Marines practiced hand-to-hand combat, with a ferocity that made Zixthor's blood run cold. They walked by enormous windows that looked out onto the ship's interior, showing massive railgun batteries and missile tubes. At one point, alarms blared and red lights flashed. A squad of Marines in full combat armor rushed past the delegation, their armored boots making the deck plates ring. Each Marine stood nearly 3 meters tall in their suits, moving with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for something so large. Just a drill, Voss explained casually. We run combat readiness exercises every 6 hours. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. The words echoed in Zixthor's mind. This level of military preparedness was their standard. What was their heightened state like? The Kel scientists in the delegation were frantically recording everything they saw. One of them, a female named Pelia, stumbled slightly. The high oxygen content was affecting her coordination. A human crew member immediately steadied her with a gentle hand, but the contrast was striking. The human showed no signs of discomfort. This was his normal environment, and he moved through it with perfect ease while the delegation struggled. They reached the conference chamber after what felt like an eternity. The doors opened to reveal a large room with a table made of some dark wood-like material. Around the table stood more humans in formal diplomatic attire. At the head of the table stood Ambassador David Chen, a man with silver hair and kind eyes that didn't quite match the calculating intelligence behind them. Arbiter Zixthor, Chen said warmly, stepping forward with his hand extended. Welcome. Please sit. We've prepared refreshments. The delegation took their seats, grateful to rest. Zixthor noticed that the human chairs were slightly too large for them, making them feel like children at an adult's table. Was it intentional? Or just another reminder of the physical differences? On the table were containers of liquid. Chen gestured to them. We've synthesized beverages suitable for each of your species' chemistries. Please help yourselves. It was a thoughtful gesture, one that required considerable effort and research, but Zixthor couldn't shake the feeling that every courtesy was double-edged. I must admit, Zixthor began, struggling to keep his voice steady as he adjusted his breather again. We are surprised by your vessel. The Prometheus is considerably larger than we expected for a first diplomatic contact. Chen nodded sympathetically. I understand your surprise, but you must understand, Arbiter, that humanity takes its first impression very seriously. We wanted to arrive in a vessel that represented our capabilities and our commitment to this relationship. Your military capabilities, Luxara observed, her light pulsing with concern. All capabilities, Chen corrected gently. The Prometheus carries scientists, engineers, medical staff, and yes, military personnel. We believe in being prepared for any situation. Admiral Voss, who had taken a seat beside Chen, added, we also wanted to ensure our delegation's safety. Space can be dangerous, as I'm sure you understand. The implication was clear. They didn't trust the galaxy. They had come prepared for conflict, and they wanted everyone to know it. Zixthor took a sip of his beverage, trying to calm his nerves. The oxygen-rich air, the overwhelming scale of everything, the casual displays of military might, it was all designed to unbalance them, to make them feel small and weak and out of their depth. And it was working. Perhaps we should begin discussing the terms of your integration into the Galactic Council, Zixthor suggested, trying to regain control of the situation. Chen smiled, that same unsettling display of teeth. Of course. Though I should clarify, Arbiter, we're not here to integrate, we're here to negotiate a partnership, as equals. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Equals. And in that moment, Zixthor realized that everything he had assumed about this meeting was wrong. Arbiter Zixthor's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or irritation. Equals, he repeated, tasting the word. Ambassador Chen, I mean no disrespect, but humanity has only just achieved faster-than-light travel. The Galactic Council has existed for 10,000 years. We have systems of trade, law, and cooperation that have brought peace to hundreds of worlds. Surely you can see that we have much to teach you. Ambassador Chen leaned back in his chair, his expression pleasant but unreadable. We appreciate your experience, Arbiter, but I think you may have some misconceptions about humanity's capabilities. Misconceptions? Luxara pulsed, her light flickering with confusion. You only made first contact with us 8 months ago. Our scouts detected your primitive radio signals 5 years before that. Your technological development is clear. Is it? Admiral Voss asked quietly. She placed her hands on the table, her fingers interlaced. Tell me, Arbiter, how long did your scouts observe us? 5 years of passive observation before we determined you had achieved the minimum technological threshold for contact. And what did they see? Zixthor felt uncertain about where this was going, but he answered. Chemical rockets, nuclear fission, radio communications, primitive computer systems, the standard markers of a pre-FTL civilization. Exactly what we wanted you to see, Chen said softly. The room went silent. The delegation stared at the humans, trying to understand what they meant. Voss stood up and walked to the wall, where a display screen activated at her touch. An image appeared showing Earth's solar system. 30 years. Ego humanity achieved practical faster-than-light travel. Not 8 months ago. 30 years. That's impossible, one of the VRIX officials sputtered. We would have detected. You detected what we allowed you to detect, Voss interrupted. For 30 years we've been watching you, studying your technology, your culture, your military capabilities. We've observed your council meetings. We've tracked your fleet movements. We've analyzed your weaknesses. The display changed, showing image after image. Council ships in formation. Station Theta-7 from angles that should have been impossible to capture. Internal schematics of VRIX warships. Communication protocols. Everything. Zixthor felt his legs go weak. You've been spying on us. For 30 years. We've been careful, Chen corrected. Humanity learned a hard lesson in our past, Arbiter. We learned that the unprepared do not survive first contact with more powerful civilizations. We learned that trust must be earned, not assumed. So when we discovered we were not alone in the galaxy, we decided to watch and learn before revealing ourselves. But why? Pelia asked, her voice trembling. Why hide? Why not seek our guidance? Admiral Voss returned to her seat. Because we studied your history. The Galactic Council has contacted 47 species in the last 1,000 years. Of those, 47 have joined the Council. Not by choice, but because refusal meant isolation, economic sanctions, and sometimes military action. The Council doesn't invite equals, it recruits subordinates. That's a gross mischaracterization, Zixthor began, but Chen raised a hand. Is it? The VRIX hold 70% of the Council's military leadership positions. The Lumini control 80% of banking and trade regulations. The Kel dominate scientific research allocation, and species that join the Council find themselves locked into agreements that favor the founding members. It's a very sophisticated system of control. The delegation sat in stunned silence. No one had ever spoken to them like this. No new species had ever dared to analyze and criticize the Council so bluntly. Even if what you say is true, Luxara pulsed angrily. What can you do about it? You're one species, one system. The Council represents hundreds of worlds and thousands of ships. You cannot stand against us. Admiral Voss smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Can't we? Commander Park, please activate the tactical display. The lights dimmed, and the center of the table lit up with a holographic projection. It showed Station Theta-7 in perfect detail, and surrounding it dozens of red markers. What you're seeing, Voss explained calmly, are the 47 additional Titan-class warships that have been in this system since before we arrived. They've been running silent, using the same stealth technology that prevented you from getting accurate scans of the Prometheus. Each one is identical to this vessel. Each one is fully armed and ready for combat. Zixthor stared at the display. 47 ships. 48 including the Prometheus. He thought about the size of the vessel they were currently on. He thought about its weapon systems that they still couldn't scan. He thought about what 48 such ships could do to the station. They could destroy it in minutes. "This is a threat," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "This is a statement of capability." Chen corrected. "We're not threatening you, Arbiter. We're showing you that we're not helpless children in need of protection. We're showing you that any relationship between humanity and the Council will be between equals, or there will be no relationship at all." One of the Kel scientists, an older male named Koreth, spoke up. "Even so, these ships are old technology. You said the Prometheus is 30 years old. Our vessels are far more advanced." "Are they?" Voss interrupted. She touched another control, and the display changed again. "The Prometheus Unbound is our 8th-generation Titan-class vessel. It was commissioned 8 years ago. Our current generation, the Titan-class Mark 11, is 3 times its size and carries weapon systems you don't have counters for." She paused to let that sink in. "We've been building and refining our designs for 3 decades. We've had time to learn from our mistakes. Time to develop technologies specifically designed to counter what we observed in your fleets. The ships you see around this station are intimidating, I'm sure. But they're not even our most modern designs. How many ships do you have?" Luxara asked, her light dim with fear. "Enough," Voss said simply. "Enough to ensure that humanity will never be at someone else's mercy. Enough to make any military action against us impossibly costly. Enough to change the balance of power in this galaxy." Arbiter Zixthor felt the weight of history pressing down on him. For 10,000 years, the Council had been the dominant force in this region of space. They had operated with the certainty that came from overwhelming technological and numerical superiority. They had grown comfortable, perhaps even complacent, and now this upstart species, these humans who should have been grateful for the Council's guidance, were dictating terms. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Ambassador Chen leaned forward. "We want mutual recognition. We want trade agreements that benefit both sides equally. We want access to galactic markets without exploitative tariffs. We want the right to maintain our own military for our own defense. We want to be treated as partners, not as children or subordinates. And if the Council refuses, then humanity will pursue our own path," Chen said calmly. "We'll establish relationships with individual species who are interested in fair trade. We'll offer our protection to any world that feels the Council's terms are too restrictive. We'll create an alternative to the Council's monopoly on interstellar relations." It was a threat, though Chen was too diplomatic to say it directly. Humanity would break the Council's control simply by offering another option. Species that felt marginalized or exploited would have somewhere else to turn. "You would fracture 10,000 years of peace," Zixthor said. "We would offer freedom of choice," Chen replied. "If the Council's system is truly beneficial, species will choose to remain in it. If it's not," he shrugged, "then perhaps it's time for a change." The VRIX delegation huddled together, communicating in rapid clicks that their translation devices didn't broadcast. The Lumini dimmed their lights in contemplation. The Kel simply stared at the tactical display, calculating odds and outcomes. Finally, Zixthor turned back to the humans. "This discussion is far from over, Ambassador. The Council will need to consider your proposals. This is not a decision I can make alone." "We understand," Chen said. "Take all the time you need. We're patient. We've waited 30 years already. A few more weeks won't hurt." Admiral Voss stood, signaling that the meeting was over. "We'll escort you back to your shuttle. And Arbiter, one more thing." "Yes?" "The Prometheus will remain at this station until we receive the Council's response. We want to ensure that our message is clear and that there are no misunderstandings about humanity's position." Zixthor understood. The massive warship would sit there, a constant reminder of humanity's military power, a symbol visible to every ship that entered or left the station. Everyone in the galaxy would soon know that humanity had arrived, and they had arrived as a force to be reckoned with. As the delegation made their way back through the ship's corridors, still struggling with the oxygen-rich atmosphere, Pelia whispered to Korath, "They've changed everything. The Council will never be the same." "No," the old scientist agreed quietly. "It won't." Behind them, Admiral Voss and Ambassador Chen stood in the conference room, watching the delegation leave on the monitors. "Do you think they'll accept our terms?" Chen asked. Voss considered the question. "Some will, some won't, but it doesn't matter. We've made our point. From this day forward, species will know there's an alternative to the Council's way, and that's all we needed to do." News traveled fast in the galaxy. Within 3 days, every major species knew about the humans and their fleet of massive warships. The images captured by Station Theta 7's sensors spread through communication networks like wildfire. The Prometheus Unbound floating in space, dwarfing everything around it. The tactical display showing 48 such vessels surrounding the station. The recordings of Admiral Voss calmly explaining humanity's 3 decades of secret observation. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on their homeworld of Vrixtar. The council chamber was ancient, built when the galaxy was young and full of mystery. Representatives from every member species gathered in the circular room, each in their designated section. The air hummed with tension and fear. Arbiter Zixthor stood at the center podium, his mandibles clicking nervously as he delivered his report. Around him, the council reacted with emotions ranging from outrage to terror. "They demand equality," High Counselor Vexmore shouted, his exoskeleton bristling with anger. "They who have one world and one system. We should mobilize the fleet immediately and teach them the cost of such arrogance." Several Vrix representatives clicked their mandibles in agreement, but others remained silent, remembering the images of those massive human warships. Prime Lumina Kreath, leader of the energy being contingent, pulsed with caution. Counselor Vexmore speaks from anger, not wisdom. "Have we forgotten what we saw? Those ships are unlike anything in our databases. We don't know their full capabilities. We don't know how many more they have. An aggressive response could be unwise. They've been spying on us for 30 years, another Vrix official protested. "They've violated every principle of peaceful first contact." "Have they?" Kill Representative Mirok asked quietly. The amphibious scientist had been reviewing the data continuously since returning from the Prometheus. "They observed, yes, as our scouts observed them. The difference is they did it more effectively. That's not a violation. That's just better intelligence gathering." The chamber erupted in argument. Species that had felt marginalized by the Council's power structure saw an opportunity. Those who benefited from the current system wanted to crush this threat before it grew. The debate raged for hours, but while the Council argued, something else was happening across the galaxy. In the Outer Rim territories, small species who had joined the Council out of necessity rather than desire received quiet messages from Earth. Offers of trade agreements with no restrictive tariffs, promises of protection from their larger neighbors, technology sharing on equal terms. The messages were simple and direct. Humanity offered an alternative. The first to accept was the Kesh, a reptilian species from a mineral-rich system that had been slowly squeezed by Council trade regulations. Their ambassador met secretly with human representatives on a neutral station. Within a week, they had signed a mutual defense treaty. Then came the Dornak, an insectoid species tired of paying tribute to Vrix overlords. Then the Silith, the Grenek, the Pax, one by one, smaller species began defecting from the Council's sphere of influence to join what was being called the Earth Alliance. On Station Theta 7, Admiral Voss monitored these developments from the bridge of the Prometheus. Her first officer, Commander Park, stood beside her, reviewing status reports. "We're up to 40 species now, Admiral," he said. 40 species have either signed treaties with us or requested negotiations. The Council is losing control faster than anyone predicted. Voss nodded slowly. They built their system on the assumption that they were irreplaceable. That species had no choice but to join them. We've proven that assumption wrong. The Vrix are calling for military action. Our intelligence suggests they're mobilizing their fleet. "Let them mobilize," Voss said calmly. "They'll find that attacking us means attacking all our treaty partners as well. Even the Council isn't prepared for a war on that scale. She was right. When the VRIX High Command reviewed the strategic situation, they realized with growing horror that any attack on humanity would trigger defense pacts with 40 other species spread across dozens of systems. The logistics alone made such a war nearly impossible. And they still didn't have accurate intelligence on human military capabilities. The VRIX fleet remained at high alert, but made no aggressive moves. 3 weeks after the initial contact, the Galactic Council sent their formal response. It came not as a demand or an ultimatum, but as an invitation to negotiate. Humanity had forced them to the bargaining table as equals. The negotiations took place on neutral ground, a station at the edge of known space. Ambassador Chen led the human delegation, with Admiral Voss present as a reminder of humanity's military strength. Across from them sat representatives from the major council species, their expressions ranging from resigned acceptance to barely concealed anger. The treaty that emerged was revolutionary. Earth would not join the Galactic Council as a subordinate member. Instead, the Council and the Earth Alliance would exist as parallel organizations, with formal recognition of each other's sovereignty. Trade would flow freely between them. Military forces would respect each other's territories. Disputes would be resolved through arbitration, not force. It wasn't perfect. There were species on both sides who hated the agreement, but it was workable, and it prevented a war that neither side could be certain of winning. On the day the treaty was signed, Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Prometheus one last time before the fleet's departure. Around her, the 48 Titan-class warships prepared to return to their patrol routes. Some would return to Earth. Others would establish bases in allied systems throughout the galaxy. "Helm," she said quietly. "Set course for Earth. It's time to go home." "Aye, Admiral." As the ships powered their FTL drives, Voss allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity a century ago. She thought about the hard lessons learned in blood and fire. She thought about the decision, made 30 years ago, to hide and build and prepare rather than rush out and meet the galaxy as naive children. It had worked. Humanity had secured its independence, its right to exist on its own terms, its place among the stars as equals, not supplicants. But Voss was also a realist. She knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers they hadn't yet encountered. There would be other challenges, other threats, other species who saw humanity as prey rather than partners. "Commander Park," she said. "Yes, Admiral? When we return to Earth, I want you to work with the shipyards. I want production of the Titan Mark 11 accelerated, and I want design started on the Mark 12. Park smiled slightly. "Planning for the future, Admiral?" "Always," Voss replied. "We've proven we can stand as equals. Now we need to ensure we stay that way." The Prometheus Unbound vanished into faster-than-light travel, its gravitational wake causing nearby stars to flicker. Behind it, the other ships followed in perfect formation. They moved like a school of mechanical sharks, graceful and deadly. On Vrixtar, Arbiter Zixthor watched a recording of the human fleet's departure. He had aged in the weeks since first contact, the stress showing in the dullness of his exoskeleton and the slowness of his movements. His assistant, young Pillock, stood nervously beside him. "Arbiter, what do we do now?" Zixthor was silent for a long moment. He thought about the 10,000 years of council dominance that had ended not with a bang, but with a negotiation. He thought about the smaller species flocking to Earth's banner, seeing in humanity a chance for real independence. He thought about the massive warships that had arrived for first contact like a statement of inevitable change. "We adapt," he said finally. "The galaxy has changed, Pillock. The old order is gone. We can either accept that and find our place in the new one, or we can rage against it and destroy ourselves." "But the humans understood something we forgot," Zixthor interrupted. "Power isn't just about technology or numbers. It's about will. The willingness to stand up and say no further. The willingness to risk everything to maintain your independence. We've been comfortable for so long that we forgot what real determination looks like." He turned away from the screen. "Watch them closely, Pillock. Study them. Learn from them. Because humanity won't be content with just equality. They're builders, strivers, fighters. Give them a century, and they'll be the dominant force in this entire sector." "Is that a bad thing, Arbiter?" Zixthor considered the question carefully. I don't know. But I know this. The galaxy needed a change. We had grown stagnant, corrupt, complacent. Perhaps these humans, with their paranoia and their massive warships and their refusal to be anything less than equal, perhaps they're exactly what the galaxy needed. Far away on Earth, Admiral Helena Voss stepped off the shuttle that had brought her from orbit. She walked across the tarmac of the military base where she had started her career 50 years ago. The sky was blue. The air was rich with oxygen, and everything was exactly as it should be. She thought about the expression on Arbiter Zixthor's face when he had seen the tactical display. She thought about how the Lumini had dimmed with fear. She thought about how the entire Galactic Council had been forced to accept humanity as equals because the alternative was too costly to contemplate. And she thought about the future, the ships they would build, the alliances they would forge, the challenges they would face. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy, not with words or pleas or requests for help, but with a fleet of warships and an uncompromising stance. They had arrived like titans, and the galaxy had been forced to take notice. Admiral Voss smiled. It was a good beginning. In the darkness of space, sensor buoys left by the human fleet continued to broadcast their message on all frequencies. The message was simple, translated into hundreds of languages, transmitted continuously. Humanity stands ready. Choose your path carefully. The galaxy listened, and the galaxy understood. A new power had risen, one that would not be ignored, would not be controlled, would not be treated as anything less than equal. The age of council dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun. Helm, she said quietly. Set course for Earth. It's time to go home. Aye, Admiral. As the ships powered their FTL drives, Voss allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the wars that had nearly destroyed humanity a century ago. She thought about the hard lessons learned in blood and fire. She thought about the decision, made 30 years ago, to hide and build and prepare rather than rush out and meet the galaxy as naive children. It had worked. Humanity had secured its independence, its right to exist on its own terms, its place among the stars as equals, not supplicants. But Voss was also a realist. She knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers they hadn't yet encountered. There would be other challenges, other threats, other species who saw humanity as prey rather than partners. Commander Park, she said. Yes, Admiral? When we return to Earth, I want you to work with the shipyards. I want production of the Titan Mark 11 accelerated, and I want design started on the Mark 12. Park smiled slightly. Planning for the future, Admiral? Always, Voss replied. We've proven we can stand as equals. Now we need to ensure we stay that way. The Prometheus Unbound vanished into faster-than-light travel, its gravitational wake causing nearby stars to flicker. Behind it, the other ships followed in perfect formation. They moved like a school of mechanical sharks, graceful and deadly. On Vrixtar, Arbiter Zixthor watched a recording of the human fleet's departure. He had aged in the weeks since first contact, the stress showing in the dullness of his exoskeleton and the slowness of his movements. His assistant, young Pillock, stood nervously beside him. Arbiter, what do we do now? Zixthor was silent for a long moment. He thought about the 10,000 years of council dominance that had ended not with a bang, but with a negotiation. He thought about the smaller species flocking to Earth's banner, seeing in humanity a chance for real independence. He thought about the massive warships that had arrived for first contact like a statement of inevitable change. We adapt, he said finally. The galaxy has changed, Pillock. The old order is gone. We can either accept that and find our place in the new one, or we can rage against it and destroy ourselves. But the humans understood something we forgot. Zixthor interrupted. Power isn't just about technology or numbers. It's about will. The willingness to stand up and say no further. The willingness to risk everything to maintain your independence. We've been comfortable for so long that we forgot what real determination looks like. He turned away from the screen. Watch them closely, Pillock. Study them. Learn from them. Because humanity won't be content with just equality. They're builders, strivers, fighters. Give them a century, and they'll be the dominant force in this entire sector. Is that a bad thing, Arbiter? Zixthor considered the question carefully. I don't know, but I know this. The galaxy needed a change. We had grown stagnant, corrupt, complacent. Perhaps these humans, with their paranoia and their massive warships and their refusal to be anything less than equal, Perhaps they're exactly what the galaxy needed. Far away on Earth, Admiral Helena Voss stepped off the shuttle that had brought her from orbit. She walked across the tarmac of the military base where she had started her career 50 years ago. The sky was blue, the air was rich with oxygen, and everything was exactly as it should be. She thought about the expression on Arbiter Zixthor's face when he had seen the tactical display. She thought about how the Lumini had dimmed with fear. She thought about how the entire Galactic Council had been forced to accept humanity as equals because the alternative was too costly to contemplate. And she thought about the future, the ships they would build, the alliances they would forge, the challenges they would face. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy, not with words or pleas or requests for help, but with a fleet of warships and an uncompromising stance. They had arrived like titans, and the galaxy had been forced to take notice. Admiral Voss smiled. It was a good beginning. In the darkness of space, sensor buoys left by the human fleet continued to broadcast their message on all frequencies. The message was simple, translated into hundreds of languages, transmitted continuously. Humanity stands ready. Choose your path carefully. The galaxy listened, and the galaxy understood. A new power had risen, one that would not be ignored, would not be controlled, would not be treated as anything less than equal. The age of council dominance was over. The age of humanity had begun.